The tail beasts didn't exist in part 1 of Naruto, and when I say that, a lot of people tell me that I'm crazy because obviously the 9 tails was in the first chapter/episode of Naruto. And yes, I'm aware of that. People also say that the Shukaku existed in part 1, and I'm also aware of that. But I am not claiming that the 9 tails and Shukaku didn't exist. What I'm claiming is that the tail beasts, as a general group of beings in the Naruto universe, going from the 1 tail to the 9 tails, didn't exist when Kishimoto began to write Naruto. It was something he came up with later. And before I explain why and how this really improved the story, like this video and subscribe to this channel to help me out. The 9 tails and Shukaku existed in part 1 as demons that could be sealed within shinobis. They were essentially aberrations in the shinobi world, things that people didn't really understand, and they tried to harvest the power. And the same thing can be said about all tail beasts, but that was just it. Back then, they were just demons. The concept of the 9 tails being sealed inside of Naruto is one of the most fundamental concepts in the entire series, which would have been very different if this wasn't the case. If Naruto didn't have a demon inside of him, then the story would have been just something else. But bear in mind that it could have been any type of demonic-like creature. It wasn't really supposed to be a creature that is part of a bigger set. It was just a demon, the 9 tails, which is based off Japanese mythology, just like many other things are in Naruto. And this is just fine. I really like the 9 tails, its design and everything. And then Gaara comes along and, oh, okay, he has a demon as well. So why did Kishimoto do that? Well, because Gaara is essentially a character that mirrors Naruto. A character that also has a demon seal within him that knows the pain of solitude and that has been alone his entire life. However, the difference is that Gaara didn't really find friends along the way like Naruto had, so he really went bad. The inclusion of Shukaku, which later became known as the 1 tail in the story, was done so that Naruto and Gaara had an even tighter connection between them. For Naruto to understand Gaara's struggle and then for Gaara to come back into the light, because the only person who would be able to bring him back would be someone who's felt the same pain and could empathize with him. But Shukaku wasn't a tail beast, and neither was the 9 tails back then. You can see when an author retcons something, whenever he doesn't introduce a character or a concept in a very opportune moment, but then he does so later, and then you think, wait, hold on a second, why didn't they mention this before? I mean, it would have made a lot of sense, and it would have made the story even better. This happened when Jiraiya returned to the Leaf Village in part 1 of Naruto, and he had that conversation with Kakashi about how the Akatsuki is forming a group of very powerful S-rank criminals to do who knows what. Jiraiya wasn't certain, but he was pretty sure that they were after the 9 tails. He tells Kakashi that the 9 tails has one of the greatest chakras in the world, and that they should also be after other things. But if the other tail beasts existed back then, if Kishimoto hadn't come up with them later, this would have been the moment to introduce them. It wouldn't have taken that much longer at all for this to be explained. Jiraiya could have simply said that there are more tail beasts other than the 9 tails, from the 1 tail to the 9 tails, and the Akatsuki was after all of them. But then Jiraiya says some really vague things like the Akatsuki is after forbidden jutsus. He doesn't get into any specifics. Just think about it. These are among the 2 most intelligent ninjas in the Leaf Village. If they knew that the Akatsuki was after the 9 tails, they would come to the conclusion that it's very possible they would be after the other tail beasts. It's just very simple logic. And the fact that they don't mention the tail beasts whatsoever in that conversation says that the concept of the tail beasts wasn't a thing at that point in time. And then all of a sudden in Naruto Shippuden, Jiraiya and Kakashi are masters of the tail beast lore. Of course, I'm exaggerating here, but they know what the tail beasts were and they openly talk about it. If the tail beasts had been introduced back in part 1, the audience could speculate, oh, what happens when you get all of them? This could have been a very interesting mystery point for the story, which wasn't really done, because Kishimoto hadn't really thought about that before. Also, nobody ever refers to Gaara's monster/demon as the 1 tail. Everyone uses the real real name, which is something odd because it's the only time it happens. Up until when Naruto learns the Biju names in Naruto Shippuden. Nobody ever called any tailed beasts by their names except for Shukaku. Even B, who was the A-Tail's best friend, didn't call him Gyuki. He called him A-Tails or Hachi-san. But back in part 1, everyone's calling Shukaku instead of one tail. And this is because Shukaku wasn't really a tail beast. He was just Shukaku. It just so happens that, oh, hold on, Shukaku had one big tail. He can be the one tail. It doesn't contradict the story one bit. Sure, you could say that not introducing the tail beasts in part 1 was kind of a missed opportunity, but still, when they are introduced, when Deidara and Sasori go after the one tail, Gaara's Shukaku, it opens up a lot of different possibilities. Now there are all these monsters that seem to be part of a similar set. What does that mean? How is this gonna work? What if the Akatsuki actually gets all the 9 tail beasts? What's gonna happen? The story of these massive chakra creatures expanded from just the connection between two kids with demons inside of them could make because they were the only ones who felt it, to something that encompasses the entire world of shinobi, that runs deep into the lore of Naruto, and I really find that interesting. The tail beasts are an allusion to atomic bombs. They are extremely powerful, quote-unquote, artifacts that can be used by ninjas to inflict the most possible damage, and they are difficult to control. Only a handful of ninjas were ever able to do so, Naruto being one of them in the end of the series. And the connection between these tail beasts and the Akatsuki, the main antagonists of the series, is also quite interesting. Another piece of evidence for this not really being planned out of the gate was that Shukaku wasn't really that powerful. Naruto was able to contain Shukaku's power when he was 12 years old, and Shukaku was actually pretty relative to Gamabunta, who got absolutely one-shotted by Pain alongside his other two massive frog friends. Pain wouldn't be able to simply Shinra Tensei a Biju away and that's it. So Shukaku wasn't really supposed to be as powerful as the Nine Tails. So much so that when Gaara used the full power of Shukaku, Naruto only had to use a little bit of the Nine Tails' chakra to win the fight. They weren't equally matched. And of course, this remained the same in Naruto Shippuden. Even though people like to say that this isn't the case, it is very much the case. The more tails a tail beast has, the stronger it is. The Nine Tails is the strongest of the tail beasts, and the 10 Tails, which is the amalgamation of them all, is obviously much stronger. So yeah, the one tail is the weakest, and by a very long margin. If Kishimoto had planned this from the start, it is very safe to assume that all tail beasts would have a much more similar power level, though the Nine Tails would most likely still be the strongest because it is the tail beast of the main character. Also, why would characters such as Orochimaru, Hiruzen, Kakashi, Guy, who by the way saw a partial transformation of Shukaku in the Chunin exams arena, never really say, oh, hold on, this is the One Tail? Because they would definitely know that the Sand Village is in possession of the One Tail, and they would certainly be able to put 2 and 2 together and say, okay, this Gaara kid is the son of the 4th Kazekage. It's safe to assume that he is probably the Jinchuriki at this point, because we also have a Hokage-san in our side that's also a Jinchuriki. And this is never mentioned in part 1. Also, the concept of a Jinchuriki itself is never mentioned, and this would be something interesting to introduce early on. We only learn Naruto is a Jinchuriki in the first arc of Naruto Shippuden, but we've known he was the host of the Nine Tails since the first page of the manga. Why wouldn't anyone ever call him a Jinchuriki? They begin to do so in Naruto Shippuden. Obviously because Kishimoto hadn't really thought about that part of the story. And this is not a fault in Kishimoto's writing. Writers very often make up things as they go. He had to write 20 manga pages per week, so it is very understandable that you cannot really plan 700 chapters in advance. The story shifts according to what Kishimoto wants to say. The expansion of the world into the tail beast was quite interesting, and it opened a lot of possibilities into the narrative. The only downside was that it eventually led to Kaguya and the Otsutsukis. But that's a story for another video. Watch this video right here for more content like this. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and thank you so much for watching.